It
All right.
is 4:47 and this meeting to order. Richie, if you could do preamble and roll call, I'd appreciate that.
All right. Jay, thank you. So in regards to the pandemic, we have to read this. So notwithstanding any provision in our bylaws to the contrary, as permitted under Albemarle County's Continuity of Government Ordinance, this authority's resolution adopted on May 14th of 2020 in Chapter 1283 of the 2020 Acts of the General Assembly, we are holding this meeting by real-time electronic means with no authority member physically present at a single central location, as it is unsafe to do so because of the COVID-19 pandemic. All authority members are participating electronically. This meeting is being held according to Section 6 of the county's Continuity of Government Ordinance. All authority members will identify themselves and state their general location, physical location, during the roll call, which we will hold next. The public has real-time audio-visual access to this meeting over Zoom and real-time audio access over telephone. Both is provided in the lawfully posted meeting notice. The public is always invited to send questions, comments, and suggestions to the authority through the county's Community Development Office at any time and through the Zoom chat and raise hand features. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the county's website. So with that, we'll do the roll call. Let's see, Jay Fennell,
Here, residents, Albemarle County.
John Moore,
Yeah, I'm here in my residence in Albemarle County.
let's see, Sherry Buttrick. Understand she's not going to be here. Rose Emery, David Emmett,
Here in my residence in Albemarle County.
David Mitchell. I don't see him. Jenny Moore. Let's see, Dr. Moses,
At my residence, Albemarle County.
and Peter Taylor, Mr. Taylor.
Present at my residence in Albemarle County.
So, Mr. Chair, that's 5 members present, and that constitutes a quorum.
Excellent. Let's begin. I assume everyone's had some minutes. I saw one small type at the beginning. Mr. Moore, Mrs. Moore.
Sorry, Jay, you were breaking up there. I couldn't understand you.
Looked like there was a small typo before your name in the minutes.
I didn't catch it.
Okay. No one let it pass. And do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. Minutes are. Mr. Clark? It's all you.
I didn't catch the vote. I didn't catch the vote. Was there
Oh,
a
yes.
vote to approve?
No, I didn't. All in favor to approve?
Aye.
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 Okay. Thank you. I failed to unmute myself in time. That's fine. I got that vote of 5-0. For the rest of the meeting, if we could please do roll call votes so that Carolyn's able to track. It's very difficult when you're monitoring a Zoom meeting and lots of people say aye to be sure who said what.
Understood.
All right. I kept saying things and I didn't realize I was muted again. All right.
Scott, I'm sorry, just to be clear, how would you like us to vote? Is there some,
We'll just do a roll call vote. I can run down the list of names when we come to items that need a vote.
okay, fair enough, thank you.
All righty. We have several things on the agenda tonight, as you can see. I will try to move through these as quickly as I can, but of course, if you have any questions along the way, please let me know. Jay, is it okay if I just go ahead and proceed through the items?
Yes.
Great, thank you. The first item, and I apologize for the confusion on this, I put this on the agenda, then I told you all it was off the agenda, and then I realized it needed to be back on. It's much simpler than you would think from all that confusion. This is the Hart donated easement, which was given to the authority in 2016. And this is the property just south of Limestone Farm on the east side of the Glenmore development area and very close to the banks of the Ravenna River. The deed permits farm buildings or structures up to 4,500 square feet or more with written permission from the grantees. So I recently heard from Mr. Hart. He wants to build a new barn. So here's the parcel in question. Here's the barn location. And as you can see, that approximate location, it is not near critical slopes, the floodplain, or the stream buffer that goes along this floodplain here. So the location is safe for the protected resources and harmless in general to the resource purposes of the easement. Just to give you an idea, these are a couple of elevations of the barn. And the main body of the barn is 50 feet wide across this main section and 80 feet long, which is only 4,000 square feet. But as it turns out, there are a bunch of little extensions designed on. And as you can see on this slide, leaving out the square footage of the hayloft, which of course is not part of the structural footprint, it's just an interior floor. This building actually has a total of 6,522 square feet. Given that it doesn't impact any of critical resources on the site, and in fact appears to be an appropriate farm building, staff would recommend that the authority approve this request for a greater square footage area. And if you're so inclined, you could just, I suppose, take an action to authorize me to write a letter stating so to the landowner. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Any comments, concerns?
What's
Do
the,
we direct, do we,
what's the overall acreage of the property again, Scott?
I just blanked. Let me pull up my my copy of the deed real quick. Sorry about that.
I've got the recording sheet, and it looks like it's 115 acres, 115.895 acres.
That's
Your Glenmore.
exactly right.
And this is a new structure or one that's, is it replacing something or?
No. No, there was nothing on this property in terms of structures when Mr. Hart bought it, other than a little shed that he turned into a kind of little retreat. There's now a house, and then this would be the first farm building on the site.
Scott, Chip here. This is a permitted structure for
Yes.
permitted use in a permitted location. The only deviance is the square footage.
That's right. And the deed specifically permits structures above the limit if the authority approves them. So it's not that we have to amend the deed or anything. This is simply a straightforward permission item.
That's key. The only issue is, does he plan other structures in the future?
He hasn't mentioned any. I mean, I suppose if he were to come back with another large farm building, then you all might want to consider what the cumulative impacts would be as compared to an unlimited number of 4,500 square foot buildings. But at the moment, this is the only one that would be there. And again, he would need to come back for any others that were also above the limit.
Then this deed, the original deed, has the then language that was in force about no commercial use.
Yes, yes. Yeah, this was a 2016 deed, so it's not the newest VOF-based template, but it did have the standard language about commercial industrial uses being limited.
Right.
And if he rents out barn stalls, does that make it a commercial use? So that, again, I'm just asking a question here.
Well, Mr. Hart has not mentioned any desire to do that to me, but as I understand it, horse boarding would be considered an agricultural use.
Okay, good. That often turns out to be the case, and it would be sort of silly for him to run afoul of the easement over like that.
My understanding has always been that uses like horse boarding, equestrian uses like that are exempt from the prohibition on commercial uses.
Okay, good.
But what triggered my question was the 315 square feet of cold storage. Unless he's running a dairy operation.
It was interesting. I don't, well, it's cold storage and mechanical. I'm not sure what all's in there. There's a shower, there's a sink. Yeah, I honestly don't know exactly what that's for, but in general, this appears to be, although a very nice barn, a pretty straightforward, typical agricultural building. It just happens to have some external extensions for feed and tack and things like that.
Scott, what would you like from us? A motion to direct you to send a letter of approval?
That would be fine.
I move that we send a letter of approval for this barn.
Yes.
All right,
Was that Mr. Moore?
it was
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Mhm.
Is there any further discussion on this? We will move then to a roll call.
All righty, let me make sure I do this the right way. Mr. Emmett,
Aye.
Mr. Fennell, Dr. Moses,
Aye.
Mr. Moore,
I,
and Mr. Taylor.
Aye.
All right, thank you very
Like
much.
that.
Was that a question from somewhere?
No, just a thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, there's audio is kind of choppy tonight, so. All righty. Next item is regarding a 1992 easement, the Riggery held by the authority and the county, I believe. This item was first introduced to you all at last month's meeting as a new business item regarding the traffic circle at the intersection of Route 20 and Prophet Road, which is here. This parcel outlined in yellow is the Riggery on which the authority and the county have an easement. The property across the road that's also in green is a separate easement held by the Virginia Outdoors Foundation. And I'll just do this briefly because we have more coming, but this is a design sketch, more than a sketch, of the traffic circle, which is being designed to alleviate a significant safety situation at this intersection. And as shown last time, there's an area of about 250 feet in length and 35 feet in width, up to 35 feet in width, in which the Department of Transportation needs to do some grading work in order to make this design fit on the proposed site. So that's my brief introduction, just to remind you where we are. A couple of steps from here, we have Ronnie Van Cleve from Bowman Consulting here, who will go ahead in just a moment and give you all a bit more detail about the proposal. And then Richie can talk a bit about what the next steps would be in terms of developing a deed of easement over this area that would be acceptable to the authority. The one update and change from last time when you heard about this was the original proposal from VDOT, for whom Ronnie's employer, Bowman Consulting, works on right-of-way issues. They originally had asked for this to be a fee simple acquisition of land for the Department of Transportation. That's no longer the case. We're now talking about an overlying work and grading easement. So that eliminates a lot of the serious concerns about diversion of conservation land. So it's a somewhat simpler situation now. So Ronnie, if you're there and ready, I can stop sharing my screen and let you go ahead with your presentation.
Sure.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I forgot to mention Richard Bennett is also here from Bowman.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Actually, I'm going to be the spokesperson, and as Scott introduced, Bowman Consulting is part of the construction team, that was contracted by VDOT to handle this project. As we're going to just run through a little presentation here to tell you a little bit more about the project other than the plan sheet that Scott showed you here. This is one, next slide, Ronnie. This is one of 6 projects that VDOT combined together in Albemarle County and put out under a design build basis. So our team is the contractor and design engineers, and our firm, which is handling the right-of-way acquisitions and the relocation of utilities for that. This is the one in the northern, in the top, right-hand corner that you see there. That is up, on Route 20, well, just north of Charlottesville. From that at that location, there's others that are improving the couple of interchanges along 64, and then one up at Rockfish Gap that's farthest to the west. But all these are under design, and we're moving forward with the construction of them. On this next slide, just a little bit, I kind of introduced the team here that you see their logos there. It is, as he introduced, a VDOT project. It does have federal funding participated in it, since it is a safety project. Federal Highway Administration is involved in it as well. Next slide, Ronnie. This is a little bit of the view that Scott has shown you, was kind of how the plan sheets were cut up. Here we've kind of merged the plan sheets together so that you get a view of the entire roundabout from that location. As you see here, the area you see that's kind of hatched are the 4 legs of this intersection here, with Route 20 running from left to right, Prophet Road going from towards the top of the screen heading over to 29, and then the road on the bottom of the screen is the entrance to the Riggery Ridge subdivision. On this sketch here, you'll see down in the bottom, right-hand corner is that same area that Scott had outlined, and that is the Riggery property that we are needing this easement from. The majority of the project, as you can see, is shifting the roundabout, towards the south and towards the west. There, the primary, portion of that. We do have a stream that the dark pipes running through the center of your screen there, that we have to take into consideration as well. Next slide, Ronnie. We have 4 legs of the roundabout there. This is the Route 20 north segment, which is what the property fronts there. And just wanted to show you here that, it's still going to remain 1 lane in each direction. We will be, grading kind of probably, a little bit wider shoulders to bring the road up to, to today's standards that way there. And then we'll be tying slopes in as we'll look at a little bit in a few later slides from that standpoint. The property, as we're mentioning here, begins at this white fence here. We're looking north, and that's on Route 20. We're kind of standing at the intersection there, so you see the beginning of the property there with the gate and the white fence, and then our easement area is going to be running along that fence, heading farther to the north there. This is the property of Martin and Adele Conniff, that acquired the property, after the easement was granted to the Albemarle County in 1992, and the total acreage of the property is a little bit over 30 acres. A little bit more on the details of the acquisition from the property. As Scott mentioned, we did, normally VDOT acquires their highway right-of-way and fee acquisition, but in working with the Outdoor Foundation over on the top side of the screen there, or the west side of Route 20, we got a determination from them that they would accept a overlapping easement in that case there, because the primary construction that we have within the easement area is to regrade the land. Up there, it's in a section where a ditch is required to take care of the storm drainage, which is the area you see there just above the Route 20 labeling with the arrows that are pointing from right to left from that standpoint there. Over on the property that you're talking about today, we've found that we could also convert that to, what we're calling a perpetual roadway easement, because there was only the placement of fill embankment and the grading of the area to make sure they flowed into the ditch that's on the left-hand side. The only addition on this side here is you see a brown triangle there. There is an existing overhead telephone pole line, that is running in the air, area, and that pole line needs to be realigned. So we are going to be acquiring a replacement utility easement, from the property owner as well. On this next slide it's probably best to look at, what we're doing is from the cross-section view here. So this is like taking the road that we looked at, earlier there and cutting the cross sections. And what you'll see here as we have labeled is the existing ground is the dash line there, and the solid line is the embankment that we have to place in that area. In this particular one here, when you see the roadway there is some curb and gutters, because with the roundabout construction, we have to channelize the traffic, to get them moving in the right direction. So that channelization is introduced closer to the roundabout, which is where this section is here. We're going to, in the next few slides, we'll be kind of moving to the north, about 50 feet at a time. The primary thing we wanted to show here is as we move north, then our height of our embankment is reducing, and we're putting in, where that arrow is pointing down the slope, we're making that slope as flat as we can. There are wetlands associated with a ditch that leads from the pond, to the corner of the property down there. So we're required by the Corps of Engineers to stay out of the wetland there. So we're tying the slope in as flat as we can, but this is a depiction of what it's going to be. A couple more moving to the north is about the same slope on this one, and I believe the last one is to a 4-to-1 slope, and that means that slope is rising 1 foot vertically for every 4 feet of horizontal width there. So that's kind of what that's depicting. The details of what Scott showed you earlier, it is about 200 feet of easement along, go back one run, along the road frontage that varies from 25 to 35 feet, and that variance is because of the existing right-of-way width is a little bit different along the frontage there. We will be using the area only to replace embankment. There will not be any roadway pavement, and the area will be returned to grass after the grading is done. We will be working with the landowner so that they can replace the wood fence, once the construction is completed. This does not reduce the area of your open space easement on this property, and the actual area of the green that we saw on the plan there is 0.18 acres, and the CenturyLink easement is 0.02 acres. Last little bit details on the CenturyLink, as I mentioned, that the easement's been there for some time. The existing poles in front of the property, will not be moved, but we have to move one pole that's closer to the Wrigley Ridge Road away from the stream. So with that, we have to pull the cables back, to tie into that pole, and we're, obligated by, state statutes to buy a replacement easement for CenturyLink. That's kind of our presentation. Be glad to answer any questions, that you have regarding the proposed project.
Could you go back to an earlier slide, the first slide that you had that showed the path of the existing road, that one. Trace for us on that representation the existing road and where it is being moved.
If we start there where the cursor is and go to the right, all we are doing in that area there where you see the hatching is we're overlaying the asphalt. The little gray strips that you see, one on the top side of that and one on the bottom side of that, is some slight pavement widening within the existing right of way in order to bring the lane width up to today's standards for for a roundabout construction. Just while I'm on the slide, there's the whole purpose of a roundabout type design in highway engineering is to slow the traffic down. And with that, we're required to introduce some curves. So that's where you see, the shifting of the roundabout over to the top side of the screen there, and in order to introduce those curves so that, that puts the, traffic speed, down to 25 miles an hour, without, by making it, difficult for cars to go through there any faster than that speed and stay within the travel lanes.
And where is the pond?
If you see right down at the bottom corner, just to the left of Bowman, there's a little bit of, I think the end of it shown up in that area there. It's kind of like, looks like a tent, right there. I think that's just the berm, of the pond. So it's right down in that area there.
Where is the fill coming from for the embankments?
It will primarily come out from the excavations over in that quadrant, which would be the southwest quadrant. Where you see those, parallel circular line, that's the stormwater management pond, which is being excavated into that, side hill there. So all the materials will just be reused on the project site. And actually there's more material than we need. So we'll have to, dispose of that at a place that the contractor works out.
Could you also trace again the easement land held by the VOF?
Where we just here with, oh, sorry. There's, if you see that fence up there right below 649, there's a line with X's along it. That's the separation of the Rivanna Farms property, which is down there where the cursor is. And then above that is actually the same landowner, Mr. and Mrs. Conniff, owns that land, that farm field over there as well, but it does not have an easement on it.
Can you, Chip, are you finished?
Yes, go ahead.
Can you talk to us a little bit about how VOF came to the conclusion that all they needed was a grading easement?
In our discussions with them, they have apparently, as part of their, practice, they look at, they have the ability to either grant a overlapping encroachment easement, or you have to go through the statutory 1704 process, to find replacement lands, and convert it to an open space easement for the release of the area, that we needed. But within the VOF, they have the ability to, as I said, grant overlapping easements, and they determined that was more appropriate. If we go back to the Ronnie, maybe down to one of the cross-section sheets, you can see over on the VOF side there, what we're primarily doing is we are, constructing that, ditch there, and a flat bottom ditch in order to both take the stormwater or drainage that's running off the field there, and also, collect any, stormwater that's running the side of our roadway there. That entire area will be regrassed. So they looked at it as saying the existing area is grass, and once the modifications are made, to the contours over there, it'll be restored as grass as well. And also, the farms will, re-erect their fence, there to the left-hand side as well. So with that, they felt like that was, the appropriate, action for them to take.
And Peter, I'll add that Richie and I have been in contact with VOF a few times about this. And I think Rich will talk about it, but that's later. I think they're still working through the exact details of what that overlying deed of easement would say. But really, there's two options here. One is the overlying easement option that we're talking about now, and the other is acquisition, which opens up the whole can of worms of the conversion diversion process, which we all are hoping to avoid.
This
So,
seems preferable.
Yes. Do we have authority to grant this type of overlying easement within our guidelines?
So although I'm recommending that we be a party to it because of the substance of what we hope of the interest that this board has, we don't have final authority in terms of granting the easement. That would have to come from the CONIFs.
Well, that was going to be my question, Richie. It would seem to me that this presentation should have been made by the landowner, not by the engineer. And until we know the landowner's position, I don't believe we can take action.
I think, Scott, we knew the landowner's position in regards to VDOT taking I think we did, in terms of taking a fee interest.
Right.
Scott did invite the landowners to the meeting today. I don't know their position in terms of the easement.
Looks like there's a landowner here, possibly, Adele Connor.
Right, and I can't get, there's the list. Yeah, Ms. Coniff should, or Mr. Coniff. Oh, there you go.
We're here.
Hello.
Hi. Hi. So, of course, we have a phone ringing when it happens. Okay. So, you want us to respond to the whether or not we're okay with the easement proposal? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the from what we've heard so far, it sounds much preferable to the fee acquisition. A little bit, I guess, until we see what the easement looks like, the document. It's kind of difficult to make a conclusion. I was a little confused by the title of Perpetual Roadway easement, whether this was something that kind of would go on forever, or whether it really would be for the construction period and then would kind of go away after the project was complete. And I guess where that kind of ties into is who has responsibility for the upkeep of the easement area after construction is complete. Would that be something that VDOT would be doing, or would we be responsible for that? I mean, I think we're okay responsible for it. I didn't quite understand how that would work out.
If I may, this is Richard Bennett with, the reason is perpetual. It does go on forever, runs with the title of the land. And it is perpetual for that very reason that you're asking, is that if for some reason, there was, heavy storm and some washing out of that, any rutting of that slope, then it would be VDOT's responsibility to go in there and repair that and stabilize it, whatever was needed in order to do it. So we do primarily do it for the maintenance. We're not anticipating that that's going to happen, but it does happen in some places. So they want the ability to go in there and be able to maintain it quickly. That will not include mowing grass behind the fence or anything of that nature like that. But if there was some maintenance required to that embankment that was placed in there, then the perpetual easement makes it VDOT's responsibility.
Got it. So we'd be permitted to put the fence back basically where it is now. Maybe there'd have to be some adjustment based on the slope that's being put in. But roughly, it'd be go back where it is today. And we continue to sort of deal with the property in terms of mowing it and whatever else we're doing with it, picking up trash. Because people do throw trash along that way, that area. We want to make sure it continues to look good, but we could just continue doing what we're doing today.
That's the intention.
So the other thing that was sort of, and maybe that's not really for this call, is in the fee proposal, the way it was presented was we would not be paid for the fence.
Well,
so I think-
the intention that if it was presented that way, it was not our, our agent should not have presented it that way. The fence definitely has to be, removed. I don't know whether the same fence can be reinstalled or a new fence, but our intention and to the authority as well. We have two obligations on this property here. One is to deal with Mr. and Mrs. Conniff to actually, get them to grant the easement because they are the fee owner of the property there. And then our second one is to obtain the authority's, agreement, that the use of this land for that purpose of an overlapping easement, meets their, their wishes with regard to this, the open space easement that was granted on it. So we have been, privately, dealing with the Conniffs on the offer to acquire, the easement from them for compensation. And then, as I said, we're asking Scott to bring this matter to the, to the authority to get the appropriate releases to the for the construction to be able to occur.
Mr.
Okay, so-
Chairman,
Sorry.
Yes,
one more question for Bowman. What is the alternative to this project if easements cannot be obtained?
Well, this project has already gone through a public development process there. An environmental document was prepared for it and was approved by the Department of Historic Resources and all of the appropriate environmental agencies from that standpoint there. So all of the approvals for construction have been obtained. We're now into the right-of-way acquisition phase, which is to obtain the land from the Conniffs in addition to the landowners in the other quadrant as well. So we will be moving forward, with the project. We can, as I said, we were hoping to move forward in this way of having the overlapping easement, but if necessary, we would go through the 1704, conversion process there and find a appropriate functionally equivalent, conversion property to replace this, area to be acquired here.
Chip, I'll just add from the county's point of view, and I'm not the transportation planner, but I'm reasonably aware of this. I do know that for one thing, you can see from the redesign of the location of the intersection that the designers have tried to pull this away as much as they can from the two conservation easements that they're dealing with, which are both to the north. So they've pulled that south a fair amount. As far as what the alternatives are, the folks from Bowman have either got the succeed in this project or don't options. Anything other than either leave the intersection in its dangerous condition as it is, or do this particular roundabout would mean backing out through that series of county and board and whatever approvals for the kind of design that was desired. And so there are two options on the table now. Theoretically, there might be others, but nobody can really say what those are because we'd have to back out through that whole process and do the design proposal again. I suppose you could say that there might be a signalization at an intersection or like that. I don't think that's what VDOT would prefer to do anymore. And actually that would probably push more construction onto the easement properties just because of turn lanes and all that. So although we only have two easily viable options now, which is do this or do nothing, getting to any other options would be a long setback for the public safety aspect of this project, and might actually be worse in some ways for the.
From the county
landowners.
standpoint, from the county standpoint, is the motivation for this to remedy a safety issue or to
Yes.
promote growth?
No, this is a safety issue. This has been a long-standing safety problem. This intersection is entirely in the rural areas. And although Prophet Road does connect across to 29 and a lot of development area activity, there's a standing safety issue here with an old-fashioned, essentially, road design with modern highway speeds, especially coming down from the north toward this intersection, where you're getting collisions from people trying to come out of Prophet Road onto 20 and colliding with people who are coming down that hill at 55, 60, 65 or more miles per hour. And it's just not safe. So yeah, this is not a development related upgrade in the development areas. This is a safety upgrade in the rural areas.
So I'd like to just make a couple of comments. It's Peter Taylor speaking. I've actually know this project pretty well and was in the VDOT office and it is an incredibly dangerous intersection. And on the SMART scale, it was, I don't know, it was 1, 2, or 3, hence the funding. And while I'm in favor of the project, I am deeply concerned about waiving a process that we have put in place as a land trust for future road takings. And we may all believe, like Peter Taylor, that this is a good idea and it is a safety issue, but we're also establishing a precedent for other road taking instances, which we may or may not agree with. And I think we have a process in place. I'm frankly amazed that VOF granted a overlay easement in this particular case, but I think our job as an entity is to preserve the parcels that we have granted easements on and go through the process that has been laid out, because down the road, there may be a safety issue that is contrary to the conservation purposes of a property that that we don't agree with. So while I'm in favor of this project, I'm not in favor of granting a simple easement, even in spite of the owner's wishes, for this roundabout.
Could you clarify, please, which process it is you feel we're not following? 'Cause from my experience, this is the same we've gone through with the various utility easement requests we've done. Is if we have an existing easement and somebody wants to put an overlying easement, we always bring it in the same way to you all to decide whether or not you're willing to sign on to that overlying deed of easement.
Except that we've always required in the utility easement that the ground be returned to its prior state.
And this essentially would. I mean, we're going from a grassy road bank to a grassy road bank. Now, I agree, if there was, say, a road coming in, passing through a wetland or a historic resource or something like that in the middle of a property, it would be a hugely different question. This is on the edge of the property in an area that is currently the mowed grassy bank of a state highway, and it would go back to being that. I don't see any significant impact to resources, and we're certainly not losing any area of land in the parcel that's under easement.
What's the Gregory built?
I'm sure the condos could answer that better than I could.
I didn't hear that last comment. I think it was from Mr. Taylor.
The structure built?
The only structure that's in this area is the fence, okay? I'm not sure when the fence was put in. I think it's been there for 30 or more years. The Riggery farmhouse, at least part of it, was built in 1796. So it's an 18th century, farmhouse. There have been additions over the years, but it's an old historic farmhouse with a lot of, historic. It's part of the Southwest Mountains Rural Historic District and all those things. So it's, it is a significant historic site, the entire property, the 30 acres.
Yep, that's where I was going with this.
If I could, I do have a plat of the entire property, like, Scott put up on the other property. Ronnie, if you stop sharing a minute.
Sure.
Is that visible now?
No,
Yep.
But that's the entire property. And, this is Route 20 that is running along the, western border of it. And where you see this notch right up here, that is the area in question. Here's the pond that was being discussed about. And I believe these represent the houses that are, higher up on the hillside there, just to, give you a view of the entire 30 acres. So what we're talking about is 25 feet in this area up here in the top left-hand corner.
Although it's 250 feet along the 20. So it's
That's
25
correct.
feet in. Yeah.
That's what that notch represents. The notch represents right away that was dedicated, when the Riggery Ridge subdivision was created, because 8 acres of this property was a lot in that subdivision, that was then consolidated with the rest of the larger holdings over here. So that's why there's a little bit of a notch or cut into that, top, property line there.
That's right. That's about 200 feet. That notch, as you call it, is about 200 feet. Then you're going another 50 feet up.
Yeah, that sounds correct.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I think the way it works is sort of to the right or north of where the notch is, that's where there's a 30-foot prescriptive easement still in place. And then, as you pointed out, back in whatever it was, 1990 or so, they did away with that. And I guess it's now a 25-foot right-of-way. But the 25-foot right-of-way is measured, I believe, from the middle of the road. So it's really a pretty slim difference between, it's basically the same.
Yes, it's just the 10 feet,
Yeah.
It's a plus or minus difference.
Yeah, and maybe that doesn't mean anything, but I've been looking at it, so I'm thinking about it.
So,
No,
I hear the precedent issue. We always are confronted with setting precedents for the future that we don't know anything about. But I hear the alternative is that it'll eventually, with a lot more effort, become available to the highway department for use, for what they need.
Well, if the design doesn't change, they would have to go through the 1704 conversion and diversion process. Now, I would guess that the holders, this authority in the county, would not agree to give that acreage, or it's not an acre even, but that square footage of land up, and then you end up in court. I don't see why that's really necessary, given that as I said, we're going from a grassy road bank to a grassy road bank, not running something through the middle of a critical resource.
I fundamentally disagree. I think that we may be in sync with the desire to increase safety and with VDOT, but you can't count on that. So our job is to stick to the procedures that we have in place. And I recognize that it may cost more. I recognize it may take more time, and I recognize there may even be accidents, but I think our job is to protect conservation values of the properties in which we hold easements. And, I feel pretty strongly about that. I think we do set precedent if we just sort of look the other way and grant an overlay easement.
So
I certainly wouldn't suggest that you all look the other way.
can I respond to that, Scott?
Please.
So I guess the way I've tried to look at it in terms of the easement is not whether the authority is changing a use or is giving something away or granting something, but the question to me was, is this use, whether it's VDOT doing it or the CONIFs doing it, is the use consistent with the easement, and is it permitted under the easement? Because I think I agree with Mr. Taylor that if the conservation easement would not permit it, then I think this authority's hands would be tied. So then the question becomes whether grading for this roadway is permitted under the easement. And I know under the more contemporary easements we do, de minimis takings for roadways is permitted. This one's a little bit older, and it does address grading, blasting, earth removal, and fill, and it prohibits it, except that it does allow grading and fill for the construction of permitted buildings, connecting of private roads. So those things are permitted. So the easement that we have does contemplate fill and grading by the CONIFs or whatever agents they would have. So I thought that was kind of key, and that the question then comes down to whether the finished product is consistent with the conservation easement. And then the other question, which I think is important in terms of the road easement, for lack of a better word, that VDOT would have, is whether their future actions under that easement are restricted such that they still have to comport with the conservation easement. I don't know if that helps or hurts. I'm not picking sides or anything. I'm just trying to lay out a kind of a framework for evaluating it.
Well, let me ask the question a different way. What if the landowners on their own didn't like the fact that area sloped down off the roadway down to a drainage area and so forth on their property, and they wanted to come in with fill and fill it up and put the fence back in at a slightly higher elevation and basically achieve the same terraforming that is being suggested here? Would we have anything to say about that?
We probably would, depending on the juxtaposition to the pond and what disruption would occur in the construction of it. In addition to that, Richard, the way you lay that out is very helpful, and it's very difficult to construe a roadway as being a conservation purpose. If you add to that the way that we just heard, you might get a little bit step in that direction. But there's no restriction, as we've heard it, on what future use could be. What is currently a graded slope could end up becoming a cement embankment. And
I think that's one of the details of the wording of the deed that we would need to get to next is if, and this is an if, but if, assuming you all determine that you're willing to consider signing off on an overlying deed of easement, then just like VOF is doing right now, the terms of that easement would also need to be established. Yeah, I'm not privy to VOF's internal legal deliberations, but what little I do know is they wanted to know exactly that same thing, is what's permitted here, and they wanted the terms of that overlying deed to set expectations about what was and was not being granted. So it's not a free-for-all within the bounds of that overlying easement. It's intended
in an effort to move this forward, it's clear that this is a problematic crossroads. It's clear that the engineers and VDOT have come to the conclusion that this is the preferable solution, putting in a roundabout, and that the roundabout should be located as it has been proposed. They're also saying that at least at the moment, there will not be disruption to the easement that this body holds. What we don't know is what restrictions will go into the deed, and we don't know the particulars of what VDOT has discussed with the VOF in a way that would allow us to say that what we're doing is consistent with the VOF's interpretation, which is a secondary issue, but nonetheless a relevant one. Therefore, I would propose that we not take action on this matter today, but revisit it when those details are in hand.
We could quite handily, I think, by the next meeting, have both a draft deed that has the modifications that Richie and the landowners feel are necessary, and have a more detailed update on what VOF is doing on the other side of the road in a similar situation. I didn't really expect that you all would just give a blanket approval tonight. This was largely an informational session and looking for a way to make some progress on this.
Yes, I would add one additional bit of information, and that is we need details on the construction method as it involves the wetland and the pond. Not how it will be returned, but rather will it be disrupted during the construction?
This is Richard Bennett with Bowman. You know, we do have some impact on the wetlands, as not necessarily on this particular portion of the property, but as they run a little bit farther to the south, you know, but that is, you know, being covered by, you know, the Corps of Engineers, you know, which are, you know, are in the process of granting a permit. They have reviewed the impact, you know, as I mentioned earlier, we're avoiding the wetlands here in front of this easement here, but as we get closer to having to install that pipe and work on the stream down in that area, there was some wetlands impact, and those are being permitted. I'm not sure whether the permit actually has been received.
Yes, but but with all due respect, what is permitted by a permitting process is not related to a conservation easement.
Exactly.
I think to clarify here, it sounds like what Richard is saying is the wetland area within the easement area that this authority controls is not being impacted, if I understand correctly. And the areas that are in the Army Corps permitting process are actually outside this property farther downstream.
Yeah, my point, though, is not the end state after it has been returned. It is the construction process itself.
Yeah. That's understand. I think all I was trying to clarify there is it's a great question, but I think the answer is the wetland portion of the Conniff's property. There would be no construction activity under the current design. So what we're talking about is just grading of a non-wetland area along the road bank, if I understand correctly.
In the wetland areas upstream also, correct?
Well, it's the stream is coming down out of that pond and running
Right.
toward the intersection. So it's
Correct.
actually, if I understand correctly, what Richard is saying is it's a downstream area to the south where there are impacts that have to be approved and I assume mitigated through the Army Corps process.
That is correct.
Right.
But that's not really relevant to the authority because that's outside the bounds of this easement.
It seems like one of the other issues too that we touched on was putting future protective language in there in terms of the limitations of what can and cannot, you know, that, Scott, I like your analogy of, you know, before and after, that it'll be the same but slightly different, merely in the grade. But then the points of it needs to be able to stay that way and not turn into a concrete embankment. And we put that protective language in there. And I also feel like that the overlay indeed is a good idea. And Peter, I get your point about precedent, but I also feel like that we also go case by case on a lot of the things that we deal with as well. And I see this project especially serving, you know, one, the easements serve a public good. This traffic circle is going to serve a public good as well too. And if we can have, you know, our easement and the conservation values remain intact in its size and that traffic circle there, then it's a positive.
So Jay, just to make a couple observations, you know, in my experience, which is unfortunately getting to be fairly extensive on these matters, to the extent that conditions change and traffic increases, VDOT can and will make necessary changes like guardrails under the moniker of increasing safety. that well may be the case, but again, there's nothing to say that that is consistent with what our body is supposed to do in protecting properties. And again, we really don't have control in many cases on those matters. So, I do understand the public good. I'm actually in favor of creating roundabout at this section. I think there is it's a very, very important decision-making process. I would like specifically, when this comes before the next meeting, Richie, to know pretty precisely what is allowed under the context of the easement and what isn't. Is it simply how the property is returned to its former state, or are there right-of-ways that are increased? Are there utility easements that are changed, and how those impact the language of the easement? I think they're really two separate things. And if in fact our body doesn't have any basis for ruling on this by virtue of what's previously allowed in the easement, then so be it. But I think we should have very clear answers to those questions from your perspective. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. What other, I think to some extent, what we wanted to do today was kind of, we call it just take the temperature and see if this is something that the authority wanted Scott and me to move forward on. I have received communications from VOF. They're kind of in a similar posture because they can't, they have ideas, but they don't know what VDOT will accept or reject. And so they're in that position right now where they're suggesting things to VDOT and they don't know what the final product's going to look like. So my thought is that if there's a sense from this board to move forward in that process, then we will work on drafting or editing VDOT's easement, their road easement, with terms and conditions. I've noted concerns that I didn't note before from today's meeting. I do think in terms of what we will propose, it won't be any secret, and that is that the easement will embrace whatever the plan is that has been presented here, with other limitations in terms of the vegetation, the grading, and the finishing, that everything be a permeable surface, that sort of thing. But in the future, it's my intention to put in there that any changes that would have to be made to the plan, or the road alignment or the design, that they would have to come back and get this body's approval and review. They'd have to submit it to review. So essentially what my recommendation is going to be is that if this body approves this plan, that it essentially gets locked in for the future. And I do agree that, for example, if the roadway were being widened and asphalt was going to be on this easement, I think we'd be in a much different situation. And in terms of the 1704 process, that's a process, but it's legislative and it's discretionary. So it's no guarantee that VDOT would get this board's approval and be able to do to widen that road. And unless the legislation changes or the law changes down the road, this body would still be in the position of but considering whether they wanted to exchange land for a widening of the road. So just kind of in summary, if this board is inclined to move forward, then Scott and I will work on editing the VDOT easement, submit it to them, and see what their reaction is. It doesn't bind, that wouldn't be anything that binds this board. We'd have to get it back and get y'all's approval. The other thing I want to say in terms of the conservation easement, Albemarle County is a party to that also. So this, to some extent, has to go through Albemarle County. And so I've reached out to Greg Campner, the county attorney, who's also my boss, but I've reached out to him to kind of loop him in to see. Now, I understand their staff, it likely is in favor of this. But one thing what we can do down the road is if they're in agreement is that they can defer to this body for future changes, if any come to pass.
Why is that step necessary, Richie? Is this jointly held?
Yes.
It is. Yes, sir.
Why is that?
I don't know. I was just starting out in the practice of law back in 1992, and I didn't know how to spell conservation. I don't know.
Do we feel like as
Yeah.
a board that Scott and Richie have enough information and questions that have come out of this meeting to start working towards that direction? Of,
Are you saying the direction being to bring much more clarity to what's allowed and not allowed on this overlay?
exactly, just addressing the points of concern that we have.
So we would bring back an actual text of a deed for your consideration at that point, rather than just introducing the concept like we are now.
Okay.
I have one question just for, could you put up the cross section that you showed for the southernmost cross section? As you went north, those cross sections changed.
Ronnie had those.
And can you show exactly where the current 25-foot easement ends? Where its boundaries are?
Oh, right.
Ronnie, can you bring that back up?
Yes.
I can tell he's got that. I'm looking for it. Look.
Can you see it now?
Not quite yet. Oh, there we go.
No, yeah.
This is
I guess that's the southernmost one.
204 is the northernmost, right?
Yes, that's the northernmost.
Yeah, what's the southernmost?
This one.
Okay, so the existing right of way, exist R/W is where you by right now can operate and do whatever you want to do. Is this correct?
Correct.
So the expanse, the lateral expanse of this highway doesn't go outside that right of way.
Correct.
So the purpose of this changing the berm here is for what?
Is to bring the roadside area up to standards, for, errant vehicles and different things like that. That's part of the safety improvement project, is to, make sure that if somebody ran off the road, that they would be able to recover if possible. Just depends on their speed and different things like that. So their, geometric standards, that shows what the width of that shelf should be, for, a certain speed of traffic from that standpoint there. And so that's what we do, is put that flat area in there, and then, find a way to, to tie it back down to the, existing ground.
So if you were to not touch our easement, you'd have that dotted line, and then you'd have a pour concrete with a guardrail on the top of it that would stay within that right of way. Is that how you'd handle that?
Well, that certainly is an alternative, to build to go up there, as you said, a barrier, guardrail requires a certain distance behind it, to deflect, so when you put guardrail up, it's not just the, 10 inches that the guardrail is. You have to have 4 feet behind it, because when a car hits it, it's going to bow out that way there. So we would have to put a, concrete barrier on top of that, which is, fixed, and will not deflect, from that standpoint there. So it would, become more like, what you see in a city than a rural area.
Does this contemplate a guardrail at all? The new plan?
It's not required with these recoverable slopes, that we show on here.
So it's not contemplated.
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right, so what's our direction, folks? Do we have Scott and Richie go ahead and prepare the deed, like that they just start working on the language, addressing our concerns?
I would say yes, but I would add that, you know, while they're going through that process, if they can address the precedential concerns that have been expressed, that would go a long way to, you know, getting the approval of the board, I suspect.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't feel like that we need to be following VOF's lead either. This is ours as well. I think it's good to be in communication with them, but by no means feel that we have to do what they do.
Yeah, and their situation may be somewhat different. It's not very different, but it may be somewhat different.
Correct.
But you know, it just seems like appropriate to cooperate with another partner in the conservation community, and to also to learn from their experience.
Yes, and as you're pinning down the details, they need to be specific enough so that the guardrail issue and the cement retaining wall and so forth is all excluded.
Yeah, that's very much our intention.
All right, does this require a motion, or are we clear?
I don't think it does. It's just kind of giving us direction for,
Okay.
you know, where we spend our time and where we put our efforts. But if I were, you know, if I were hearing from the board that there was no interest in doing this, then maybe we would have a motion and a vote on it. But as of right now, I think we have the direction to kind of keep exploring this, and then to bring back as close as we can a finished project to this board for consideration. One thing I would ask the designers, are these designs fixed in stone at this point in time, or are they subject to change? Because change is never good.
They're pretty much, they're fixed in stone. You know,
Okay.
they do not have final approval, but it's weeks away.
And when we looked at that last cross section, what was the depth of that? Because that seemed to be the greatest fill. What was the depth of that?
Well, this is probably not the greatest field that we're showing right now, but
So I guess 202.25.
yeah, that just you know, stop moving it right. Sorry.
That's close enough. What's the depth on that fill there?
That's about 3.5 feet.
Okay. All right.
And for the engineers, it would be reassuring to us if we could obtain reassurance that the construction process itself will not go beyond the area in question, and particularly not near the stream or the pond.
I mean, that's, you know, this is a VDOT administered contract, and they have, you know, a lot of VDOT personnel out there to make sure the contractor, you know, actually sticks to these limits here, you know, and to work through that way there. So it's a very highly inspected, you know, transportation projects are very highly inspected by the state, you know, and
Yes.
there's, you know, significant specifications for, you know, every item as far as, you know, placing and compacting, you know, this material in there so that it is a good finished product.
Well, that's certainly reassuring, but we would wish that reduced to writing in what we will approve.
Okay, well, I mean, there's thousands of pages, but we certainly will put that in writing as well.
All right, Scott, Richie, you guys good with this?
Yep.
I feel pretty good.
All right. How about we move on to the Huber donation?
All right, thank you. We'll be leaving.
Yeah.
Gentlemen,
Great.
thank you all
Thank
very
you
much
all.
for your time.
And to the Conoffs as well, thank you for coming. We really appreciate your participation.
All right.
Thank you all.
All right.
Just you? Yep. All right.
While I'm getting my PowerPoint back up, I just wanted to say one quick thing, which a couple of really good points that Mr. Taylor and Dr. Moses made with, that didn't work, regarding that last item, was that the difference between the county's role and the authority's role in a project like this. I just want to reassure you all that although Richie and I are obviously county employees, and I'm trying to pass on what limited amount I know about some other county projects that are going on that I'm not directly involved in. When we come to you all, we are easement authority staff. And when we make a recommendation on something, it's based on that conservation value analysis for the authority, not on our perception of what the county wants or VDOT wants. We can try to understand those things and help explain them to you, but our recommendations are based on the conservation values of the easements.
Thank you.
So having said that, we have a revised proposal here for the Huber item that you all heard last month, I think, or the previous meeting. And Mr. Reback is here to answer any questions you all might have. So what changed here is that after you all acted to approve this easement, which obviously is not recorded yet, the Hubers realized that they had an additional need for a dwelling for a family member. So what they've proposed is to change from the existing dwelling or its replacement being the only permitted dwelling on the property up to 4,500 square feet to spreading that 4,500 square feet across 2 permitted dwellings. Now, on the one hand, this does take the proposal below the typically recommended density for easement authority easements. On the other hand, it doesn't increase the above ground finished area of development on the site. So that's kind of the balance that we need to consider here. So here is the property again along Cove Garden Road. And this is just a slightly amended map to show there's the existing dwelling. And the only real addition here is I have shown the approximate location of a 2-acre building envelope that would be allowed for that second dwelling. But this is, again, staying out of the stream buffers that were established in the previous approval, and of course, staying out of the mountain protection area that was also included in that approval. The resource protections are the same, except that you've got 2 building footprints instead of 1. And in terms of the proposed terms, what this would do is take the permitted size of the existing dwelling or its replacement down to 3,000 square feet. So essentially saying where it is, and then applying that additional 1,500 to a second dwelling, which would have to go in a building envelope in approximately the location I just showed you. So the landowner's question to you all is, would you consider changing the approval to these terms? The only issue that came up with this, again, is that it doesn't meet that 40-acre density guideline that you all have. But so the next step is, staff and the landowners would like to get your feedback on what you would like to approve or not in this case. And Mr. Reback is here and can give more information or answer any questions you have.
Well, this is exactly, I hope, similar to what you all permitted for Robin Haynes earlier this year, where we take 4,500 square feet, which would have been the main dwelling size, and split it. The existing dwelling is 2,942 square feet, and you would allow that to go up a few feet, 60 feet to 3,000. And the caregiver, in this case, it would be the daughter of the Hubers, who is retiring from practice in Lexington, Kentucky. She might very well come home, wants the property, and would like to have a 1,500 square foot cottage that she could live in while she was looking after her parents.
Scott, can you go back to the map? I'd say I'm not opposed to the idea in general, but it just seems like it's the building envelope spreads the buildings so far out across the property versus centralizing the buildings more closely to one another. That's one of my concerns.
the daughter that I was referring to specifically did not want to be at the same end of the same corner of the property as her parents, but.
And when Mr. Reback and I talked about this, one of the reasons that I suggested this particular area was that it wouldn't require any real change to the one existing crossing across the stream buffer that would be mandated by the easement.
Okay.
There's a driveway there, and then so this site would actually have a separate access that would be outside the stream buffer. They don't need to go through that again or widen the one that's there for the second house.
Understood.
Scott, I know we've seen this before, but I can't quite figure out on this map. So it looks like there are 3 houses that are adjacent to the road that are not part of this property. Is that right?
Yeah, there's 3 across the road from here. So the red outline is the Huber's property. The lower elevation obviously is down by the road. There's a fair number of houses scattered along this road, including those 3 across there.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I'm looking, is that a railroad track or what am I
Yeah,
seeing?
that's the Southern Railway is here.
Okay.
This is
Okay,
Cove
all
Garden
right.
here.
I missed that. So the access to those little houses is off the main road. Is that
Yeah,
right?
that's a state road. Yeah.
Okay. And where relative to other conservation easements, existing easements, does this property lie?
Don't believe this was directly adjacent to any existing easements. If you'd like to see what's in the wider area, I can pull up a separate map that shows that.
In John Grisham's neighborhood, which is all under easement.
Let's see.
Cove
Hang
Garden.
Hang on just a moment. All right. Apologize for the delay. I'll have it for you in just a second. And I just need to share that real quick. Come on. There we go. So the yellow outline is the Huber property here. And as you can see, there's nothing really quite adjacent, but there is one almost corner on across the tracks. This is the Grisham property. And then also up on the mountain, there's a whole strip of easements along there.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thanks, Scott. Thoughts?
Oops.
So if they wanted to do agricultural or some other type of building, not a residence, what are their limitations on that?
Yeah, what the standard limitations from the template, the change in this proposal wouldn't change any of the typical permissions for structures. And the building envelope would only apply to a dwelling, not to farm buildings.
Right. The point being they could build a 1,500 square foot structure if it weren't necessarily a residence. Like it was a farm related structure, right?
They could, I believe the proposal includes, yeah, no structures at all would be allowed above that 900-foot elevation line. Let me go back to sharing my screen here. So whether dwelling, farm building, accessory building, whatever, none of those would be allowed in the mountain protection area.
Right, right. But that's its own little bit of the property that's in green hatching on the map that previously showed us.
Right.
Yeah.
To come back up.
The barn behind the existing house, which for many years they had commercial sheep operation there.
So there's a house, there's a couple of accessory buildings around it. And it's this magenta hatched area that would have no structures permitted.
Right. So the issue for us here is that we would be approving a higher ratio of residences to the total amount of acreage of the easement, the 40
Right.
acres.
That's right.
And I'm new to the body here, relatively speaking. Has that never been done before?
Well, we have some cases where the properties are too small to meet the 40-acre guideline to begin with. And I can think of, it doesn't usually come up because I guide people away from that, or the properties tend to be larger, but we do have a few over the last, 10, 15 years when we've been working under these guidelines that have permitted that. There's one up near Advanced Mills, I think, that permitted a more than 1/40 density. Not a lot of them.
We've had to tangle with this so many times. It's guest's house or farmhand dwellings. We have bent on this issue depending on the situation. But, I think the criteria that we have is trying to guard against not tractor sheds and cow sheds, but to guard against extra driveways and traffic and that sort of thing as well. It's not just the fact that there's a building there. So,
the guidelines focused on residential density.
May I interject that the Hubers are almost 90 years old, and both of them. And so if they will probably need some caretaking help, and this daughter who has medical training is seriously contemplating coming back here in a couple of years.
So just to interject here to move this along, if this property were not near other substantially eased lands, I would be inclined to say no. But due to the success, increasingly these smaller fill-in easements, I think, have great value to the overall feeling of conservation values over time. So given the fact that this is almost adjacent to a big chunk of conserved land, and recognizing that we all may be in a situation where we need caregivers, I'm inclined to give it the benefit of the doubt.
Chip, John, David?
well, yeah. My question, again, this is for this particular landowner, but we always think in perpetuity. So this dwelling is an ideal rental property then afterwards. Correct?
True.
My take is similar. If the new structure were being proposed adjacent or quite close to the existing one, there would be no question in my mind. It's the location that's the issue. That's mitigated to some degree by the relatively small size, but if the landowner could be convinced to move the building envelope closer to the main structure, then there would be no question about it.
There have been cases, including I think it was the Yellow Mountain property, where the way the authority has approached this has been to set a maximum distance from the existing dwelling. So you would require the main dwelling to remain where it is, even if it's replaced, and then the accessory, if you want to call it that dwelling, we don't really think of them as any different. The dwelling is a dwelling, but 250 feet, 300 feet, whatever it is. Now I realize, Ms. Reback is saying maybe this particular landowner isn't thrilled with that idea, but that is a way that the authority has approached this in the past in order to limit the overall spread of developed activity, if you want to call it that, on an easement property, is to keep those dwellings within a certain reasonable distance of each other. And maybe, you know, that 300 feet that we've used before is enough to keep the new residents' parents out of her hair.
Right, that's my sense too, is keeping the buildings close, so to speak.
I would be prepared to go back to say that we'd be prepared to accept that if the building envelope were moved.
So the big, preferring to accept it, but moving the building envelope closer to the existing structures.
Obviously,
Yeah, maybe on the other side of the
side,
stream,
I'll back
other open area.
What was that, John?
Just on the other side of the stream in the other open area there, sort of, you know, is close to the stream. I guess is might be necessary to provide sufficient separation.
It also looks like a new septic field in there.
Good eyes.
And also it eliminates the need for another access road to the highway.
Exactly.
Which is a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
okay, so what's the opinion?
So if I'm not mistaken, we're willing to more strongly consider it if the house, the proposed building site is closer to the existing structures. And so it would potentially also share the existing driveway as well.
Yeah, I mean, it actually could be where you're running the cursor now. If it could be maybe tucked up closer to the trees there, would sort of yeah.
Yeah.
It would, and somebody mentioned septic fields. It may run afoul of the septic field for the main house, which is probably closer to where the main house is in that open space area. But that's pure
I think
conjecture.
Jay's seen it there.
That's just a guess.
Yeah,
I think
but
he's
that-
probably right.
The 2-acre box, that's it, you know, the septic fields don't take up that much room, particularly for those size houses.
Right. And the box only really applies to the dwelling. It doesn't really matter if whose septic field is in that box.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Are you all willing to specify the distance from the main house, from the existing house?
What do we say, 350 feet?
We've
I'm
used
getting from, I was going to say from the corner of the house to getting close to the stream buffer is about 413 feet.
I think we've used 300 before in a few cases.
I'd be willing to give them a little more latitude than that.
Yeah, I think rather than specify a distance, you know, maybe a more generalized location, obviously a lot smaller than that 2-acre yellow box. But if it turned out that it worked to put the house up closer to where the woods are, if that ameliorates the look of it, then so much the better. I mean,
Right.
either that or turn it down flat so that you don't have 2 residences on a property this size. I mean, it's one or the other.
Yeah.
I really like the idea that Dave's idea about sharing the driveway. I think that mitigates a lot of the impact.
Yeah, which could easily be done, you know, once they're on the other side of the stream. Certainly.
Yep.
I mean, what do other people think? Are you more concerned about the linear distance or the actual location on the site?
I think just changing the, I mean, you can reduce it. I don't know if you can get that yellow box on there, it'd be very close, but I just moving the envelope to there and let the owner decide exactly where in that envelope they want to put it. I think the distance part, we've used that in the past, and you can say it's to the nearest corner of the building or whatever. But if you just say that's the building envelope, then they can organize a 1,500 square foot building in there wherever they want it.
I mean, they could build it, they could go through that cut in the trees into that open spot in there and be back there and hidden away. Yeah.
That could work as well.
Do we just want to say east of that stream?
Not a bad idea.
There's two separate things going on here. There's the question for you all about whether you want to permit this area to be spread over 2 houses. As we talked about before, the building envelope is something that's of concern to the landowners and the IRS. We don't generally much care about these boxes, but we can certainly accommodate people by putting boxes in places that also meet the authority's needs. So if we were to, Ms. Reback and I can go back to the landowners and say, hey, are you okay with it here? Or is that over your septic field? Or do you want to put it back here in this open area? Will one of those work for you? And find out something that does. And then
Yes, Scott, if
proceed from there.
draw some smaller boxes and I can ship it off to Mr. Huber next couple of days, would that be possible?
Yeah, and then the only question is, is the authority willing to authorize staff to prepare a deed for the chair's signature on the assumption that, we can find a box that meets the criterion of being on the same side of the creek as the side creek as the existing house. You could say, maybe you want to see this again. I don't know. It just depends on whether you feel that we can handle that sufficiently for you or not. I kind of hate for the Hubers have to wait yet another month to work out that final detail, but that's your choice as the authority on how that proceeds.
I'm comfortable with having the 2 houses, and I'm comfortable with the east side of the stream as a criteria.
With the square footage as stated and the trade-off of square footage, I think it shows that they're giving something, as well.
Subject to the 300 feet?
Yes.
Subject to the 300 feet?
No.
Well, because it could get tucked up back in the woods. There's a cut that goes back into the clearing.
It seems like there's 2 areas that would be acceptable to the authority, as if I understand correctly. One is this field directly across from the existing house, or this open area behind the band of trees.
Correct.
So if we could find an envelope that fits one of those areas and meets the Huber's needs, would it be acceptable for us to go ahead and prepare that deed for the chair to sign?
Well, I
And
think it would be.
May help whoever their daughter, it's their daughter that's going to move here. It doesn't want to be too close for whatever reason. Yeah, we don't know what the dynamics of that are, and so that would give her an option to get behind the tree buffer.
And that tree buffer is just about as far away as the existing envelope as well.
Yes.
Right.
And one of the things I didn't like about the envelope is it's right in the most open space.
It would be very visible. Yeah.
Right.
If you put it over here, then it's closer to the existing house and it's kind of a unit. If you put it back here, it's less visible than this one that's out by the road. So, if we're even though it's not technically a part of the easement, if we're considering the scenic quality from the state highway, either of those boxes would be better than the one that I drew.
I would be prepared to make a motion to approve, subject to you finding an agreeable solution in one of those 2 locations.
Can I ask for just one clarification on that motion,
Yes, of course.
just for drafting? I heard the board speak about maintaining the stream crossing and not allowing other stream crossing. So is that one of the conditions that would be part of the deed?
It certainly
Both
would.
houses would use the same one.
Yeah, and share the driveway, that's the single stream crossing, and it would share that crossing.
I second Chip's motion.
Okay. So further discussion?
for drafting purposes, so we're looking at the amendment they're proposing with the addition of the second dwelling must be built east of the stream. I'm hearing an envelope as according to the donor and as the donor arranges. And then a single stream crossing and sharing of the driveway.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Jay, what did you say? That broke up.
Yes. All right, is there any discussion?
Okay.
All right, I guess we can put this to a roll call vote.
All righty. All right, Mr. Emmett,
Aye.
Mr. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Fennell,
Aye.
Mr. Taylor,
Aye.
and Dr. Moses.
Aye.
All right, thank you.
All right,
Excuse me.
okay. Do you have any more on here? Are these all you?
Yeah, that's all. They're all for us.
All right,
Okay, we have two brand
These
new
are-
donation proposals. Mr. Reback is representing both of these
Scott?
landowners. Yes.
Before you get started, you only have about 20 minutes left at the most.
Okay.
So I have another
Um,
that starts at 7 on the same account.
Right. Thank you, Caroline. I appreciate the
Right.
reminder.
Uh-huh.
I will try to go very quickly. So these two properties are on the same map, as you can see, because they're directly adjacent to each other at the end of Bluffton Road, north and east of Whitehall. To my mind, these may be the simplest items we have tonight because the CS Farm property is 98 acres of woods in a valuable conservation area. I won't read everything here because we're running out of time, but just to point out that the CS Farm proposal would be, go back here, it's 98 acres again, lots of critical slopes, lots of forested critical slopes, perennial stream that's on a recognized aquatic habitat of value, and there would be no subdivisions. The existing dwelling or its replacement in a 2-acre envelope, which is in the existing area that I'll show you again in a moment.
yeah, that Jim and Barbara got.
Again, accessory structures need to be within 200 feet of the dwelling. And essentially the remainder of the property would remain as forest under the same natural forest provisions that we've used on the Haynes project and a few others in recent months. So that's the, and again, let me go back to the map. That's this property here in red is the CS Farm property. You can see there's the one house there, and there would be a 2-acre envelope approximately in that location to have that dwelling or its replacement, and then accessory buildings, excuse me, would need to be within 200 feet of that. The remainder of this property, including this very important wooded floodplain and these wooded slopes and the mountain protection area, would remain as they are. So I'll be happy to take any questions.
This is a great puzzle piece as info between easements.
Right. Yeah, there's quite a bit of other easements in that area as well.
Is the second property we're considering the same owner?
No, it's a separate owner, and although the terms are very similar, that one's totally undeveloped and would remain so. But we would need two different actions on these because they are separate owners. I just used a single map.
I think it's a great easement.
Motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, roll call vote.
Righty, Mr. Emmett,
Aye.
Mr. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Fennell,
Aye.
Mr. Taylor,
Aye.
Dr. Moses.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
All be that easy.
Yeah. This one should be even easier. This is the Payne proposal, which is the one adjacent on the orange outline. which has a significantly larger area of the mountain protection area and of critical slopes. This property is currently totally undeveloped and would remain so. It's essentially the same terms as the CS farms, except there's no dwellings permitted. And let's see, so no subdivisions, no dwellings. The natural forest terms apply. It doesn't have that same area of critical floodplain because the streams on the Payne property are intermittent, but otherwise it's a highly important area for conservation in that part of the county. And we would recommend that the authority accept it.
Questions?
No, but this accomplishes what we could get in the mountaintop protection ordinance, so I'm all for it.
All right.
Yeah, this is way better than that, actually.
Yeah. To say the least.
I move that we accept the easement.
I second.
John seconded it, Scott.
Thank you.
Roll call vote.
Roll call vote. Dr. Moses,
Aye.
Mr. Fennell,
Aye.
Mr. Emmett,
Aye.
Mr. Moore,
Aye.
and Mr. Taylor.
Aye.
Thank
Let's
you.
find 20 or 30 more like this year.
Yeah.
Amen.
I will gladly take them.
I've
I
already-
have one item for new business, if that's all right.
Pardon, Scott?
I have one item for new business.
Okay.
I'll try to be quick. Those of you who have been around for a while may remember the Sherwood Farm easement just east of Carter's Bridge. It's about 600 acres. It was done as a donation. And the farm manager has contacted me about a new barn they want to build. This easement allows buildings to be constructed and enlarged or replaced, but there are building envelopes within which there are no size limitations, which I'll show you in just a moment. Outside those building envelopes, any increase of more than 5% requires grantee approval. So here's the property in a very rough old map from a long time ago. The white areas, the white polygons are the building envelopes. So that's essentially the area in which most development will happen. The barn we're talking about is at this yellow dot. So it is subject to that written approval for more than 5% increase standard. So just so you can see it, here's the sketch from the farm manager. They have an existing barn of 7,500 square feet. They want to remove that and replace it with a 10,000 square foot barn. Here's the floor plan. This is a cattle barn. This is a big slab with rooms for livestock and ramps to get into these rooms, and that's about it. Given the distance, let me go back to the location here. The state highway is down here. Given the distance from the state highway, the wooded area, or any floodplains or streams, I don't see that replacing the 7,500 square foot barn with a 10,000 square foot cattle barn right next to it has any real impact on conservation value, and it does allow the ag portion of their operations to continue. So staff would recommend that the authority direct staff to write a letter of approval for this increase in size.
What if they forget to tear the old one down?
Honestly, I don't really see what the problem would be, but if you all want, we could certainly put that in the letter as a provision and say that provided that the old barn is removed, then the authority.
No, I wasn't really going there. I was just curious, was that, if they didn't tear that down, is there something in the fine print that they'd be violating? That's all I'm asking. Otherwise, it wouldn't matter to me. But.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't think it does matter.
Okay.
It's right in the middle of the farm in the grazed and worked area.
All right. Thoughts, motions?
One thought could be, I mean, if that's a genuine concern, is to
Hey, I withdraw it. I withdraw it.
Oh, okay.
I was just saying.
Well, I was just
Really?
gonna have the owners sign the letter and return it and make it essentially an agreement, but,
No,
okay.
I
All right,
just-
all right, all right, all right, all right.
There is an extraneous issue that is, makes it relevant. Currently, there is a shortage of what is being euphemistically called a meat processing facility, otherwise known as an abattoir. And in other parts of Central Virginia, barns are being converted for that use. Now, that raises all sorts of issues, whether it's agricultural, whether it's processing, whether it's commercial and so forth, as well as zoning and permitting issues. But I think it is appropriate in this case that they're asking for an increase in the footprint, that we ask them to tear down the old structure.
Yeah, the abattoir use, our easements generally say that ag processing is not an agricultural use unless it's, the word just went out of my head, but basically you can only process your own stuff.
Right.
So if you're processing your own cattle, that's fine. If you're processing everybody's cattle, that's not okay. That's also the case under zoning, just for what it's worth.
Like making bourbon from your own corn that you grow.
Don't even.
So,
Don't say it.
I mean, is that handled elsewhere in the agreement?
Yes.
I mean, in other words, they could leave the barn there, but it's not to be converted to.
Yeah, the barn, the building question and the use question are separate in this case.
Yeah.
We're only really dealing with the building question at the moment. They would have to come back again separately for a use question.
I would recommend that we ask that the old structure be torn down, not replaced.
Yeah.
We can certainly put that in the letter.
Yeah, we put that in writing.
I'm okay with it.
And would we like to say, they've got a 6 months or a year or something after the new one is built to tear the old one down. I assume they don't want to tear the old one down first.
Right.
Scott, I'll work with you. I just feel like if there's some notion that it's going to be enforceable at some point in time, that we'll have to have acknowledgement from the property owner.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, just put it in writing. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Discussion? All right, roll call vote.
All right. Mr. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Fennell.
Aye.
Dr. Moses.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor.
Aye.
And Mr. Emmett.
Aye.
Alrighty.
I had one very small piece of new business just to bring up. It's just about staffing. It's talking with Sherry yesterday about approaching the Board of Supervisors. Rex is really hot to approach the Board of Supervisors, and we were discussing that strategically. It seems like it should come from us, not from him being our mouthpiece. And I'm happy to do it. And what we're thinking about, and this is open for discussion for later on, I just wanted you guys to think about it, is that adding another half-time employee plus an intern and possibly integrating Chess into this because he's already in the fold with the ACE program. We don't really need to do anything. I just wanted you guys to be thinking on this and if you had any ideas. And Scott, your thoughts are always important in this area.
If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know.
Okay.
Quite a lot of history on this. When I was still chairman, I believe it was 3 years ago, was it, Jay, that I met with most of the supervisors and broached this issue with them, and at least the supervisors at that time were receptive to the notion of expanding the staff. I think in addition that it not come from Rex and the PEC, that it not come from Scott either, and that puts him in an awkward position as a county employee, so that it should come from this body as a request.
Correct. Thanks for volunteering, Chip.
What did I volunteer to do?
Nothing. I got it.
So the duties of this.
That's why I'm no longer the chairman.
The duties of this person would be what?
Basically to I think before that, we come up with an agreed set of bullet points to present to the Board of Supervisors, and then individually meet with the Board of each supervisor, presenting our argument of why we need more staffing. Also, and Rex has been working on a document, and I'm not at all shy to steal it from him.
And you've also, of course, got the report I did in 2017 and updated in 2019 that
Exactly.
hopefully will be
Thank
some
you,
of
Jeff.
assistance.
Yes.
This certainly predates Peter, you joining, and maybe, and certainly John also, that Scott did put together a comparison of the staffing of other land trusts that held a similar number of properties and a similar area of properties. And we fall far short. I think that the numbers I recall was at least 1/2 time person, but probably 1.5 time people, even if you make allowance for the legal support and the other in-kind support that we receive from the county. So there's a strong case for additional staffing for 1 or 1.5 times more people, primarily for monitoring.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can remember even in my short tenure, some discussion about this previously, and I certainly concur, particularly with the comparison with other land trusts and, you know, the responsibility that we hold to monitor easements and so on and so forth.
Oh, I can send that report out again for those of you who haven't seen it. Carolyn and our Zoom license are about to turn into a pumpkin in about 2 minutes. So
Right.
I'd hate to cut off the discussion, but we are going to run out of time in just a moment.
Okay. Well, I think that's got it, folks.
Move we adjourn.
Rex just sent an email saying we didn't allow for public comment.
Yeah, I saw, meant to bring that up.
He's also listening. Hi, Rex. I got a text from him. So, all right. I heard one motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
No roll call here. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Fine meeting.
Thank you, Scott.
guys.
Thanks, Richie.
Thank you all for getting through all of that.
Bye,
Gentlemen,
everybody.